A lot of people are hearing about layoffs in the state of California when it comes to our public schools and even charter schools. And so people are surprised at that and wondering what is going on. So these are often referred to as March 15th letters. And what that means basically is that it has to be in compliance with state law that mandates any district that is considering laying off a teacher, a staff member, even if they're temporary or probationary, by law, they must notify that person, that staff member, by March 15th of the year. That way, people can go ahead and start planning for the future. Districts can go ahead and start planning. And so that's why they're called the March 15th letters. It is considered to be due process. This is done every year. So every spring, districts have to decide, are we going to issue? Do we need to issue? How many must we issue so that we can properly plan? Well, the big issue is this year, there are a number of factors that have created somewhat what we call a fiscal cliff. And what that means basically is that we've seen from the governor's numbers, from the Independent Legislative Analyst's Office, we are anticipating a very severe budget deficit in California. And the numbers are varying, but I've heard anywhere from like $65 billion, for example. It's a big number. And if we start looking at that, then the governor and the legislature will have to decide how much to cut from the various pockets, including schools. And as we know, we find that about 40%, over 40% of the state budget each year is allocated to schools, the Proposition 98 mandates. And so it's a pretty sizable number that would have to be cut. So there's a number of issues. One of them is, of course, the deficit that California is facing. A second major issue that is contributing to this so-called fiscal cliff this year in advance of the March 15th decisions is that COVID funding has ended. And so there was a period of time where if you go and you talk to various districts, they will tell you they were somewhat rolling in the money because of COVID. Well, that money is gone. And so there were a lot of positions that were generated by COVID monies. Another factor is also related to COVID, and that is declining enrollment. This doesn't affect everybody. There are actually some districts in California that have seen increases in enrollment, and many charter schools as well have faced increased enrollment. But for the most part, I would venture to say that most districts have been impacted by declining enrollment. Some parents have just left. They've moved out of state. California is not affordable. They've gone to Florida, or they've gone to Tennessee, or they've gone somewhere else. We've also seen that many parents, because of COVID and having seen what was happening in the school system because of Zoom, they said, I don't want my kid to be in this school. And so they removed them. Maybe they put them into a Catholic school, for example. Maybe they enrolled him in a charter school, and charter schools have seen gains in enrollment. Maybe they decided to homeschool them. But the bottom line is that contributed to declining enrollment. And therefore, every time that a student leaves the district, that is a loss of money from the state to the district, contributing to the fiscal crisis in that particular district. So there's a lot of factors that affect the fiscal crisis. There's also, by the way, cost of living increases. And there's one that's also impacting the district as well this year. So there's a lot of factors there that districts have to balance out to figure out how much do we cut. Now, let me stop for a moment and just say that these very March 15th notices, usually they are sent out on the basis of seniority by contract. And that's why the other angle in looking at March 15th in the whole reform movement on teachers And who do you keep? There's been a lot of criticisms on the use of seniority as the basis by which to keep teachers in a district. So many times districts will let some of their best teachers go, but they are forced to by the contracts because they have to keep the more senior, usually more costly because they've been in there in the system longer, but they're forced to basically give up some of their newer teachers, maybe younger teachers, more recently trained, maybe more energetic. Those ones are often gone, all in the name of seniority. So these March 15th notifications, they have a lot of implications and a lot of debates in educational reform, including, do you pay teachers on merit rather than seniority? Many of these debates and inaction, I would say mostly in California, are all tied to this March 15th procedural mandate in California. But remember as well that just because one is issued does not mean that they will be laid off. And sometimes I will say it can be used for political leverage. It can be used by organizing. It can be used by the teachers and the staff unions to basically go knock on the doors of the school board members that for the most part, they themselves elected. And we can talk about reforms there, who votes in school board elections? What about the role of money in electing people? So it can be used for a lot of antagonism. It can also be used then to say, don't you dare shut down my school, even though there's declining enrollment. So you find a lot of policy making, decision making by school boards that maybe are not in the best interests of the district and sort of kick the can down the road without really dealing with some of the issues in order to save jobs, but not really thinking about what is needed for the fiscal health of the district. Let me also address another point, and that is you often hear of the tussle between traditional school districts and charter schools. And we've seen overall that traditional school districts, they're basically mandated by zip code. Depending where you live, it's just mandated. If you live in this particular zip code, some bureaucrat somewhere in a district will tell you, you must go to this school. Not only the district, but the school. And you cannot leave. And those boundaries are protected. Well, parents over time have pushed back. And that's why we've seen the rise of the school choice movement, where you have magnet schools, you have open enrollment, you have charter schools as well. But remember, those reforms have also given rise to the pushback because districts will now say, well, golly gee, you charter school on the next block, you're taking my kids. And so that's why you find a lot of debate as well, whereby parents are saying, wait a minute, these aren't your kids. These are my children. I want the best education. I should have choice in education. And especially if the school district and that school is not producing the outcomes or have the safety record, or maybe there's curriculum issues that I don't agree with, then as a parent, I should have the right to say, I don't want my child to go there. I want to take them to the school of my choice. And that's why charter schools with more flexible curriculum, with greater ability to hire and fire teachers without these March 15th notices, but on the basis of merit and progress and learning outcomes more so, can say, we have better outcomes in learning overall. So that's why we have found some decline. I don't think it's fair for a district to blame the charter school on the declined enrollment, but clearly I do think it is fair to say you have to look at the correlation. There's a push. There are only so many students to go around. And with greater choice, parents can choose which school performs better. Where do I want my kid to go? And I can take my kid there. And so I think, so a lot of these debates around charter schools, the pushback, remember charter schools they can be unionized, but it's not mandated. And so in traditional districts where you have unions, oftentimes there's a sitting down and saying, we got you. This is our clientele, the little body. We get the money, cha-ching from Sacramento. We don't have to do anything. It's okay if they're not learning. All of that is pushback then from the charter schools and the magnets that say, oh yeah, if parents have a choice, we have to serve the customer. We want to serve the customer. We want to do better, because if not, that parent will pick up their little kid out of that seat and take them somewhere else, and the money that goes with the child where they feel they have a better option. So all of these issues of school reform and the fights and the battles that we hear about, you can understand by also looking at these March 15th notices. So it's not just a layoff notice. There's so much involved with the March 15th notice. This is actually a good time for somebody to go sit in a school board meeting. You can see this in action. You're going to find union members certificated and classified, probably in their t-shirts, maybe with signs saying, don't cut education. And really, nobody wants to wish somebody to lose their job. But when the argument, I think, is don't cut education, I think it's really about don't cut our jobs. And so we have to look at that. But it's a powerful time to organize. And in election years like this one, most school board members, most legislators, governors who may or may not be running a shadow campaign to become the next president of the United States, they don't want to see these union members there saying, don't you dare cut us because we're going to remember you at the next election. That's power. That's strength. And the kids don't have that. Kids don't have a union. Kids don't pay dues to somebody. Kids don't have March 15th notices. And so that's why I think it's incumbent on the education reform movement. And I'm proud of parents that have stepped up and really advocated to say, we want to look out for the adults in the system. We want good teachers. We want them to have decent pay and working conditions, but we expect them to be highly prepared. I believe in a merit-based system whereby it doesn't matter just how many years you've been breathing on the job, how many years of seniority, and then you get saved while somebody else gets let go. We want to see outcomes, and our kids deserve that.
If you haven't checked out CaliforniaInsider.com, we highly recommend you do that now, because we're going to have a lot of news and videos there. And on top of what we have there right now, we are building a really big platform to cover what's happening in California, so you can be informed. We're going to have more shows, more videos from all aspects of life in California. Go to CaliforniaInsider.com and we'll see you there.